Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 161, coming to you from River Road Studios in Eugene, Oregon. This show is sponsored by Ace High Heat Graphics, custom imprinted shirts, t-shirts, pants, hats, you name it. If you want to raise money for your organization, selling t-shirts is one of the quickest ways to do it, and they can help you figure out the best shirt and the best ink to be able to figure out the best profit for your fundraising program. Contact them at sales@acehighheatgraphics.com. We're also brought to you by Occupy Medical.
Occupy Medical is a free integrated health clinic in Springfield, Oregon. We are a 501c3, and we believe healthcare is a human right. You can get a hold of us at occupy-medical.org.
Get healthy now with Candace.
Get healthy now with Candace. I do consults both near and far. If you'd like to sign up, you can get on the schedule at gethealthynowwithcandace.com.
And what's your specialty?
Oh, I love working with people who are struggling with digestive issues and nervous issues like nervous anxiety, insomnia, things that are of the nervous system and often stress related. And often the two go hand in hand.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Hunter Creation. Hey, did you ever want to sell something online? Did you ever want to grow your business from the garage, take your business from the garage to the world? I can help you with that. At Hunter Creation, we can consult with you to find the best way to use e-commerce in your favor, whether that's a WordPress plugin, whether that's using a BigCommerce, whether that's using Ecwid. There's a million little e-commerce ideas out there. I've done and produced a lot of them. So I can help you pick the right one to move your garage business to a global business. So contact me, Patrick, at Hunter Creation, graphic design and website design at huntercreation.com.
Oh, okay. Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting. We have a brand new, the royal me, myself and I have a new email. So take note of this, folks. It's Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting at gmail.com. And I do herbal consulting that I work with people that already have a diagnosis. I can do it a distance, or I can come to your house if you're in the area, which is the Eugene, Springfield area. If y'all are on the East Coast, I'm not coming over there. I'm so sorry.
Unless they pay your travel fees and expenses, in which case I'm betting you'd probably consider it.
Okay. Yeah, then we might as well go to the Bahamas.
Right.
Well, no, now you're getting greedy.
Well, okay. But, hey, there's right. The dream is out there.
It's the secret. If I put it out there to universe, then I'll get to go to the Bahamas for an herbal consult.
That's right. I suspect that what would make you feel happy is sitting under this coconut tree right now.
Actually getting out from under the coconut tree and having the cabana boy shade you. Because you don't want coconut hit you in the head.
No, you don't.
That hurts. Yeah. I can tell you. That hurts.
That would take different herbs for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, other than that, go ahead and get a hold of Sue at Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting at gmail.com.
Nice. Okay, so how can people help us? People always ask me, how can we help you?
How can we? People always ask you that all the time.
How can I, as a consumer of your Practical Herbalist and Real Herbalism Radio podcast and website, how can I help you?
You're listening right now. One thing you can do is write a review for us.
Great.
Another thing you can do is you can go on to Amazon and check out the ebooks that we have, because we have a number of them.
How would they find them?
Why, they would use a search engine.
They would go to Amazon.com.
Oh, so you think?
They'd go to Amazon.
Who's the tech person here?
Go to Amazon.
So wait. Search engine would mean they just type it into Google.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to go to Amazon.com
first.
Yeah.
And then search on Practical Herbalist Press.
Practical Herbalist Press, that's right.
Ooh, and if you want to double support us that way, you could go to our website first, click on one of the links there, then buy one of our ebooks there. And then shop for your holiday stuff and everything else you need.
That's
and then we get referral fees for everything that you end up purchasing. So that's like double support.
Buy Kindles for all your kin. Load them up with herbal books.
Kindle, yeah.
And or maybe get to Amazon in the first place through the Practical Herbalist website.
By clicking on any Amazon link you see.
That's right.
That would be a beautiful gift to us.
If you need a Thanksgiving costume, then rather than buying one from the local Thanksgiving costume store, then There might be that.
It
thing.
could be like a pie plate. I bought a pie plate in time for
That's
Thanksgiving last year because I needed one to make pumpkin pie.
Online. So
And,
you start from our website and you go dancing around on there, and then we get a little portion of those sales.
Yes,
So
I actually
instead of-
did buy one online.
We have something to throw in our swear
So-
jar.
You're right. So if you
Yeah.
want to buy a turkey costume for Thanksgiving and you want to do it on Amazon, why not come to our site first?
Why not?
Yeah.
There you go.
That sounds
Simple
like
way
a
to
good idea.
support.
Or a tofurkey costume.
Oh God.
Oh, that's
so
even
you're
better.
Is that just a square?
rectangular.
Square
Yeah,
piece
big
of
rectangle.
Yeah.
Rectangle with like a
seasonings.
fan of carrots off the tail.
Yeah, that's
Oh, that's
exactly what it
creative.
looks
Nice,
like.
nice.
I am an
Exactly.
artist.
Right. So how else could that person say that they wanted to? I wanted to help. What would you tell them?
Oh, consider joining the Herbal Nerd Society.
The herbal what?
The Herbal Nerd
excuse me?
Society.
Wow. How do I do that?
It's awesome. You go over to the Practical Herbalist website and you click on the little link at the top that says Join the Herbal Nerd Society.
So they go to practicalherbalist.com
Yep.
and then they go look at the website, which is a cool website, by the way.
It is very
And at
cool.
the very top there's a little menu, and the second thing in says Join the Society. I believe.
Yeah.
You have to have a credit card.
Yes,
Yes,
so
we don't
you
take
credit-
checks.
We don't
credit
take
or
checks.
Debit. Credit or debit.
Yep.
Right. You
Yeah.
can pay with your credit card, or you can even do PayPal, and you can do your PayPal account
Yes.
through your bank account, or you can do credit card there as well.
That's right.
Yes.
And for little 17 cents a month,
a day.
a day. Sorry,
A
17
day.
cents a day.
Wow.
Hey, that's
Oh,
a deal.
now we're in trouble because
Yeah,
it's
no.
not 17 cents a month. It's
17
$4.99.
a month,
$4.99
or
a
17
month.
cents a day.
Yep.
So that helps
Depending
us
on the month.
with everything that we do here, from Candace's and Sue's time in writing, to my production of the podcast, to our servers, to everything else that we do to bring the information to you. That helps.
Stuff costs money, people.
It does. It does cost
It
money.
does. It does.
And time costs money. I mean,
Mhm.
I have a full-time gig. Candace has a full-time gig.
I
You've
have
got a full-time
several
gig.
of them.
Yeah.
Right. So this is just one of the gigs. And, ultimately our long-term dream would be that this is the gig.
Yep.
That would be so
But
fun.
that takes time to build. And so anyway,
And we need your support doing so.
we need
Mhm.
support doing so. I don't want to sound like a public radio station, but we need your support.
Yeah.
people.
Oh, and
We don't have rich
share the
relatives.
Practical Herbalist and Real Herbalism Radio with your friends and family.
Yes.
Tell them to
Give
tune in.
reviews.
Right.
Tell them to
Through
tune in.
Facebook,
Share it,
Instagram.
share it.
Mhm.
All of that. Share it.
Share it.
Send it out.
Share it with everybody you know because it's really cool.
It is really cool. All right. So we had Thomas Easley in the studio. That show was pre-recorded from the springtime when he was part of the Real Herbalism project,
The Free
Herbalism
Herbalist Project.
that Mount Rose Herbs puts on here in Eugene. He was kind enough to stop by our studios and talk with us and have a nice conversation. I think we made him dinner that night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
And he brought up the functional herbalism, which got into a whole conversation of, accreditation of, what is an herbalist? What is this? What is that? And I thought that was a really good discussion. And I know we talked about that over dinner after we recorded. So I thought, today's Herb Lab is all about you guys talking about functional herbalism and what that means and what it means to Thomas and how that's going to build and what you guys want to move forward with. So I know I'm getting there. This is my intro. This is my intro.
I was being the cool
Yeah.
nag, but
I
you
know.
blew my cover.
I did, because I'm being
Just so that y'all
I'm riffing my
know-
intro.
Sue
Okay.
kindly wrote just host with a question mark.
I didn't
and
write
held
a
it
question
up.
mark.
And he, and then Patrick just blew it.
I did
He-
blow
he
it, but I know
flung-
I'm
he
not going to
flung
take this
it
out of the
up,
podcast,
man.
so
We
they're
love
just
it.
going to see this is Herb Lab. So anyway, the whole point is that this is my intro, and then I will introduce the
Okay.
hosts.
Okay.
So without further ado, here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Susie Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Sue Sierra Lupe, and welcome to Real Herbalism Radio.
Oh, and enjoy our guest, Patrick, who has much to say about functional herbalism.
Yeah.
I was
yeah.
just
Yes.
doing the intro. People.
Come on and
Yeah.
join in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, he when Thomas was here, he really got us going. And you can if you haven't listened, listeners that are joining us for the very first time, go back one.
Yeah. Go back and
to-
listen.
to podcast 116. You'll hear we got our blood up.
Yeah, it's not hard to
And a
do.
ball, as you'd call it, a ball.
Blood in a ball.
Yeah, this is going to be a long podcast.
For you listeners, Sue has an interesting way of saying oil.
She has that lovely Southern drawl.
That Texas thing.
The Texas
I'm
thing.
telling you what, just because y'all don't know how to talk doesn't mean I need to lower myself to your levels.
Well, you know now.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds less friendly.
It sounds less friendly.
Yes, friendly. Wouldn't you say, honey?
We've
the Minnesota accent's quite friendly.
They're from Minnesota.
It is, don't you know? With that in mind, okay, so you had a thought, and I sidetracked you. Sorry.
I did. Because we were pretty riled up about it because it's a big conversation.
It is.
And it hits a lot of different. What?
Well, instead of boiled and boiled, now you went riled.
Riled.
How do you pronounce it?
It's roiled. You roiled them up.
What?
No,
riled.
Riled them up.
Riled.
She pronounced it just fine.
Okay, you know what? I'm just going to sit back here and...
No, you're not. You're going to jump in every 5 seconds.
No, I'm going to doodle.
No,
you guys
you're
got
not.
your point. Okay, Sue, he got you riled up.
Professionals. All right. So, yeah, you got all riled up because it touched on a lot of different hot points.
It did.
I think for Candace, her consistent hot point is that certification can mean gentrification.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, gentrification and shaping of the field by forces who don't understand medicine, the field, or plants.
Dummies are everywhere. We can't prevent that, but we don't have an herb for stupid.
Yeah, and
That's
I don't.
Ashwagandha doesn't help.
Well, I take it and look here.
I mean, you could try ginkgo biloba.
You could try that.
Isn't that a mental tonic, right?
Well, at least increase some circulation.
Yeah.
Okay. So you still can't cure stupid. All right. Okay,
still can't cure stupid.
Okay, keep going.
All right. So I think for me, I got all excited about having an option for when somebody wants the particular type of service that I offer, and to have something behind it where people know what to expect, and that the people that I work with, if they were certified in that manner, then there would be a beholden for them. And there would be, just like with medical doctors and nurses and other medical experts, they're supposed to every year get CMEs,
continuing education,
so that they are up on all the newest stuff. And I know a lot of people that they just allow themselves to get lazy.
Yeah.
What they learned back in the 70s is good enough for now.
Right.
And that's just that's not good medicine.
Even what you learned back in the aughts isn't good enough.
Right.
Because it's changing.
Yeah, it seems like what I learned last year isn't good enough. I constantly have, and both Candace and I are very curious people. So I think it's easier for us to continue. But other people, I think they get overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
And they get comfortable with what they know. So like, it's always worked, so it'll continue to work. But we're seeing more diversity of folks now. So the things that worked for a particular population at a certain time, there's no guarantee.
We're also seeing changes in our environment and in our emotional, political, social climate. All of that affects the health of the individuals in it.
Yep.
And it's changing. It's different than it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the pollutants and other
social stresses,
stuff in the air, those are changing. So that's causing different disease patterns. And the food that's available to us is different than it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So all of these things are constantly changing. You can't just rest on your laurels.
Yeah. Just watching the news, for example, before we started clinic on Sunday, the Occupy Medical Clinic, one of the nurses went through and says, okay, we had a rough day in the news. The whole week was really rough, and anybody that has been sexually assaulted, they're gonna be really riled today. So see how I said that? But when people come through, check in with every single person and ask how are you doing, and then give a significant pause to let them know that this is a safe place for them to talk. And we have counselors there, and those counselors were busy, and we did talk about people's reactions to. The things that have been brought forward with the U2, the Supreme Court, with all of that stuff, and people feeling very disempowered, and that their world was being stomped on. And there wasn't, to a lot of the people that we worked with, they didn't feel like there was going to be any change except for the worse. So I was glad that nurse said that. And that's not a continuing education thing, but
continuing education allows you to have a greater tool set and a modern, up-to-date tool set for working with that. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of changes just in the therapy fields.
Oh, for
Just
sure.
so
for
how
sure.
to relate to people and how to best help people.
Yep, we've learned a
You know,
lot. We've
yeah.
definitely learned a lot. Well, and that just keep up with people, keep up with yourself, keep in contact even with yourself and how you yourself are feeling. There were a lot of people that were in the clinic that one of our staff, particularly, I talked with that person afterwards, and they said, that was a kidney stone of a week. It was really, really rough, and I am super triggered. So I was really glad that we had such a supportive staff.
Yeah.
So that people could, we were kind of stepping back and then letting other staff, tag team kind of stuff,
Right.
because of the stuff that was in the news. And that kind of stuff, it's just as important as taking in another class. It's constantly keeping your brain going.
Well, I think that in many professions, you don't have to include education as part of your regular job. Like, you just assume it's part of it. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of professions you do. You don't necessarily need to do it. Like in the insurance industry, you don't necessarily need to do it to keep constantly getting licensed, but your industry and whichever company that you're selling with will have constant changes. So because they have to change to deal with whatever their regulations are. So you keep training. And I think herbalists there are many herbalists who have thought of their profession as something that you learned it and now you know it. And the reality is you learned it and you know something, but you need to keep learning because you actually don't know it.
Right.
And after 50 years of practicing it and learning every year, you still don't know it because there's always something new and a new approach or whatever.
Yeah, because we don't have tiny little isolated villages that the majority of us are practicing out of. So you need to have a diversity of models. When we have people come into the clinic and they say, well, I'm used to using this traditional Chinese medicine formula. Do you have that? Oh, well, I better know something about that formula before that passes through my hands.
Right.
I can't sit in a luxurious spot where, even though I've been doing this for a couple of decades, that I know it all. I don't know. Right. I know enough to know I don't know much.
Right.
And I will never know it all. I will never know enough.
Right. Right. And I mean, honestly, I personally just love learning.
Yeah.
So it's a joy to be able to incorporate regular education into what I do.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the fact that in our field, we have webinars, we have live classes, we have online live classes, we have books, and we have a large number of avenues for continuing that education.
Yeah, and cross-referencing that is good. The confirmation bias that I've been struggling with for myself, just that's been my dilemma of the week, is confirmation bias, where I have an idea of what something is, and when I'm listening, rather than listen for what the person is saying or listen to what the point is, I'm listening to confirm what my preconceived idea was.
Right.
I cannot do that.
No, that's actually really
unhealthy.
Dangerous. Yeah, it's a dangerous practice.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous practice because a lot of times the client will say something that is really not part of that pattern, and that something is actually the key to recognizing the proper pattern.
Yeah.
And
so having the background, like for instance, what Thomas Easley was talking about, you take the class, you take the test, and then in the years to come, you're still updating and taking more classes. It's rattling and taking you out of that comfort zone, so that you're like, oh, this is new. Here's a new way of using this plant. Ooh, I don't know.
Or a better understanding, like, oh, here's labs that confirm the use of this plant, which is helpful.
Yeah.
Because you may think, okay, this is a person, I think I want this plant, but it could be that one. Let's look at the labs. Oh, the labs show me that one is not the right one. This one is the right one.
Or the labs have changed. Like we have so much more progress with the lab work that you can get now that it just wasn't available 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we have learned also how different things, when you get your standard lab work, how those different blood levels for whatever, calcium, magnesium, etc., how those integrate with each other.
Right.
Whereas before they were seen more as isolated constituents, and they're definitely not seen that way anymore.
Right.
So keeping up on that and what we can do. It seems like the more medicine advances and more technology advances, the more it points to, oh, the systems are more complicated than we thought.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
which is that's
Yes.
our wheelhouse. As
Yeah.
herbalists, that's our wheelhouse. Like, oh yeah, I told you.
Yeah,
And of course, we would
exactly.
never be so immature as to say, I told you. Never.
No, because we'd say, I told you so.
Oh, right. Yes, that's right. Use the full phrase.
The full phrase.
And then put your jaw like this. Mm-hmm.
And relish it as you say it, like
I
you're
told you
enjoying a
so.
fine whiskey.
Perhaps shake your head a little bit.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yep. That's how we do it, because that's how we rock it.
Now, a word from Thomas Easley about the Journal of Functional Herbalism.
The Journal of Functional Herbalism is a free online journal promoting the integration of traditional Western herbalism, clinical nutrition, and functional medicine. It's published by the Eclectic School of Herbal Medicine, and you can find the Journal of Functional Herbalism at functionalherbalism.com.
Yeah. Well, what are some other things from that interview that kind of caught you a bit?
Well, one of the things I'm hoping that we'll see over the next decade or so is schools like Thomas's, where they have a really strong set of clarity, uncompromising clarity about what he expects his students to know,
Mm-hmm.
providing, being able to do tests and certifying, and hopefully moving into a place where they can get like accredited,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like as universities are,
Right.
so that we start to see, because that was the structure that they had way back when,
Mhm.
100 years ago. That was the structure that was destroyed by modern medicine. And I want to see that rebuilt, because I think we can see that would be a really good way for herbalists to have accreditation, or a license, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
But not really a license, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
A paper that
Right.
says, hey, I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have I have a respectable amount of knowledge about how this works, and experience and practice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm hoping to see. That I don't really personally want to see it at a government level, because I don't want to see, that's where the gentrification comes in.
Mhm.
I don't want to see herbalism become something that it's shaped by health insurance,
Mm-hmm.
that health insurance decides how we practice and what herbs we do or don't give. And I don't want to see the government making those choices about, saying, oh, well, it's not important to learn this set of skills. You only want to learn that set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
They're all important skills. And one of the things I think is beautiful about the herbal field is that right now you can choose a wide variety of how to pick your herbs, as it were. There are people that are like the Chinese system, and they use Chinese herbs, and they use the formulas, and they understand that system, and that works really well for them.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that, really like the lab work and the science, and they get down to the chemical constituents, and they can look at, somebody's labs, and that is the tools they love. And both of those two should be allowed to practice. But a state body is unlikely to say, oh yeah, we're going to have everybody test on Chinese herbs in that system. Everyone's going to test on labs in that system. Everyone's
Mhm.
going to test on traditional Western Ayurveda, all of that. We're not
Well-
going to see that kind of level of licensing.
We already have, the TCM practitioners, they're kind of our gateway. Like, we do have insurance paying for acupuncture.
Right.
We do, particularly for addiction services. We do have
Mhm.
insurance paying for, I believe it is in Illinois, there's a clinic, a TCM clinic that works outside of a hospital.
Mhm.
So, and it doesn't mean that the person that is the practitioner can only learn that one way, but within the confines of that clinic, this is what they use. And I
Right.
kind of do that in my clinic. There are things that I use with my private consulting with people that come to me privately, and then there's certain ways that I work with just in the clinic.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think there's a problem with herbalists having flexibility.
Right.
I just don't want
You
to
don't-
see
you
the
don't want there to be
government
no-
or the insurance companies telling us this is the areas that are okay to learn for licensing, and that's the only important stuff. Because there will be the swath of people, like the people that, for instance, are traditional Western herbalists, like Matthew Wood.
Mm-hmm.
is he going to get a license? I mean, I don't know about Matthew Wood personally. Maybe he reads labs and all of that stuff. But, does every herbalist have to learn traditional Western and Ayurveda and TCM and labs and whatever others?
But that's a different conversation. If you are an herbalist and you're working in a hospital and you're getting insurance, then there are certain things you have to do. There are these bare bones you have to do. If you're working privately, like we always have been and always will be as well, you have a different gamut that you work with.
And that's assuming we don't have state board licensing. When you start getting into state board licensing, then those folks who didn't get the license through the state could be at risk of practicing herbalism without a license, just like one cannot practice medicine without a license, regardless of,
You can't diagnose or treat. Well,
yeah, exactly.
I think I'm not sure that I see it. We need to make sure that it isn't limited in that way. But I think one of the catches, and this is really weird for me to say this, but it's true, I think, is you look at a pharmacy, look at all the herbs that are OTC. We didn't have, when I was growing up, you wouldn't find turmeric at a pharmacy when I was growing up. Now you can.
Right.
You can buy it right off the shelf. And for that OTC, it's seeing those herbs as over the counter. Just like no one's going to tell you, well, a doctor can prescribe aspirin, therefore you can't use aspirin on your own. Of course you can.
Right.
Yes, you can. And you could talk to somebody to say, well, I've got some liver problems. Should I continue to use this aspirin? Like, well, that's a good conversation. That OTC, that over-the-counter medication thing, guarantees the fact that there is pharmacies that sell that kind of stuff, and it's available in grocery stores and health food stores.
Sure.
That is a setup that makes it available for all of us to have access to that stuff. The fact that we have grocery stores, you can't say, okay, now turmeric's illegal.
Right. Obviously.
And carrots.
Obviously, home herbalists will be able to keep practicing as they want.
Yep.
But I think it would be a real shame if the only way you are allowed to practice and get paid to practice as an herbalist is through a very narrow bandwidth, which is what will happen if a state licensing starts to be required. If we start moving into that territory, then we are going to narrow the field significantly.
Maybe, or we'll widen it.
I highly doubt that will happen. I just highly doubt it, because the funding and the money isn't going to pay. The big pharma and all the things, that the capitalistic nature of it, I think, is unlikely to say, oh, now you can take state licensing and you'll be licensed as an herbalist that uses traditional methods, or you could be licensed as an herbalist that uses scientific methods, or an herbalist that uses some other methods, native healing or whatever. I mean, my concerns are right now, herbalism is a field where many, many different types of people who understand plants, people, healing, health in different ways can all come together, and we can talk a common language, and we can all use the tools that are best for us. And then we can walk away and each have our own practices. And the reason that you choose chamomile for someone might be different than the reason I would choose, but we still choose that same herb for that person, and ultimately it helps that person.
Right.
And it's okay for you to use your thinking the way that you think, and it's okay for me to use my thinking the way that I think, and we both arrived at a conclusion that works, and it's okay.
Right. The healing.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you start looking at standardized testing, which is essentially what licensing is, it's hard for them to get the whole gamut of all the different fields.
Yeah, well, they definitely can't. But they do have certain tests. If you're a doctor, if you're going to be a GP, or if you're going to be an oncologist, or if you're going to be a dermatologist or whatever, there's a whole bunch of different things available. And there are people that, I remember when naturopaths, that came around, there were a lot of herbalists that were saying, oh, well, this is it. We're not going to have herbalists anymore because we have these doctor herbalists walking around and they're going to change the whole field and, whatever. And I also remember in the 70s when nurse practitioners, it used to be just nurses and then there were doctors. And what everybody knows about nurses is they do a hell of a lot more than many doctors do.
Right. Yeah. They're more involved in direct patient care.
Exactly. So having that place where there was like a ground in between a nurse and a practitioner, the nurse practitioner, doctors were saying, well, that's it.
Right.
There goes the neighborhood.
Right.
Now it's all going to be the wacky prescriptions and that's it. And other people were saying, okay, well, like, both sides, the conversations needed to happen just as this conversation needs to happen.
Right. But there were a lot of schools and there's a lot of establishment that has been able to be a part of that creation of the governing structures there.
Yeah.
Herbalism doesn't have that same structure. We don't have the foundation.
No, we don't.
That's why I'm
saying
saying
there.
That's why I'm saying I'm hoping over the next, decade or so, we start seeing schools like Thomas's. So we start seeing a lot more schools that are moving into the place where you go there and you can get an accreditation, essentially. You can get an accredited certificate or whatever you want to call it, degree, as it were, from those schools that spell out clearly and without compromising, this is what the curriculum is, this is what's required,
and there are consequences if you make errors. A couple listeners that have been listening to our show for a while remember that we had a herb lab after Amanda Dilday had her podcast, and we talked about exactly that, how there are all these people that they were making grievous social errors and hurting people, and so what? There's no herbal body that stood behind the community and said, okay, you made that mistake, and there has to be a way of A, fixing it, and B, making sure that it is not duplicated.
Right.
But what do we have?
Right.
We just have Thomas Easley. Would they have a standards of behavior?
Ethical standards?
Right.
I don't know. But at least he's
the kind of guy that would.
Well, and the way I look at it is that we have a lot to rebuild. We had all of that 100 years ago, century ago. We had all of that, and it was dismantled in favor of the modern medical system we currently have.
So we did before and do it again.
So we need to rebuild all of that infrastructure before we can get to the point where I feel we could actually have state or federal licensing for herbalists. I'm not, 100 years from now, the phrase "don't say you can't suggest that herb because that's practicing herbalism without a license" may be an okay phrase. But today I don't think it is, and in 10 years I still don't think it's likely to be because of what we have to build just to get there. I mean, technically at home, when little Johnny comes to mom and says, "Oh, I don't feel good, my stomach's upset and I'm too hot," and mom gets out the thermometer and says, "Oh, you have a fever, you might be coming down with the flu," she's just diagnosed. But we can't say that, because saying that she diagnosed is practicing medicine without a license. But to say, for mom to say, "Oh, you've got a fever, you might be coming down with the flu, here's the medicine I'm going to give you," whatever that looks like. It could be an over-the-counter drug from, big pharma, or it could be an herb, whatever. Technically.
There's protections for that, because mom's not getting paid to do that.
No, mom's not getting paid to do that.
Sadly, capitalism runs everything here.
Yes.
So mom can say whatever she wants, but and mom can diagnose her kid all she likes. She can't write a prescription for it, but she can
technically she can't. But if mom writes to her college age kid who says, "Mom, this is what I'm feeling," and she writes, in an email, "Oh, you could be coming down with the flu. Try A, B, or C." She's just prescribed something.
But she's not getting paid for it. So that's where the thing is. It's like, for example, with Health Information Act, the HIPAA Act that everybody all throws around. If somebody says, "Oh, you destroyed my health insurance protection," it's not health insurance protection, although it feels like you destroyed my privacy and you said this thing. The thing that HIPAA comes back with, number one thing is, do you have electronic medical records? And you say, "No, I do not." They're like, "Oh, okay. Well, then we don't even know how to have this conversation." That's the way it goes.
Yeah,
it's all run by money. Mom's not a threat to any doctor.
Mom's not a threat, but an herbalist, if they suggest the idea of a diagnosis and then tell someone to take an herb that could be misconstrued
because they're getting paid for it.
because they're getting paid for
Right.
it.
And that's the difference.
And if mom's neighbor's kid has the same thing happen and the neighbor comes over and says, oh, I saw little Johnny got really well really fast. What'd you do? Oh, here's a tea.
Mhm.
Oh, I just handed you. How about I give you $5 for that? Okay. Now mom's just gotten paid for diagnosing and prescribing.
Maybe.
I mean,
know.
honestly,
I'd have to
these
look
are
at
really
that.
far-fetched
They're
examples.
totally far-fetched. And we're
But
looking
my-
at fear-based
but my-
mentality
my
right here.
point
But we have to have
is-
a conversation about
My
it.
point is that as herbalists, we look at a client.
Mhm.
We have to call them a client. We cannot call them a patient because calling them a patient is practicing medicine without a license, and I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
So I look at a client, or
Mhm.
we herbalists look at a client and we say, oh, your tongue is really, really red, and you've got these other set of symptoms that indicates you could be having some inflammation in your heart and your digestive system.
Mhm.
So here's some herbs that you could try using. And we have to be careful about how we even language it. We've just looked at someone, come up with a conclusion, and then suggested a potential course of action,
Mhm.
which is exactly what a doctor does. But we are not licensed, so we have to be really, really, really careful
That's
about
right.
what we say and how we say it.
Mhm.
And we never, ever tell somebody to try anything.
Mhm.
We don't even tell them to try a better diet because that's kind of a prescription. I mean, you could say that's where you start getting into the weird areas.
Well, that's when you need to go to your state and look at what the rules are, because there's different rules and different.
Yeah. And I mean,
if you're a professional herbalist, you should definitely have read those rules.
Right. And it is wise just to be careful anyway.
Yes.
And the reality is, as an herbalist, unless you really did go to med school and are actually a doctor, you do need to be really careful about what you suggest.
Well, hell, the doctors need to be really careful too. They get into huge trouble. And everyone should watch the way they talk.
Yeah.
No matter what. I mean, one of the nice things about being an herbalist is, there's restrictions. You can't say this, you can't say that. But we are more consent-based than the standard medical society. Right. We have to say, here are some options. I mean, we are very patient-centered.
Yes.
We're not doing the commanding thing at all. That's
and I think that's
a
really important part of our field.
Yep.
So I'm not entirely against the fact that we can't call them patients and we can't diagnose and we can't prescribe, because I think it helps with the humility, which is one of the pieces that I think the medical profession has lost that. And I think part of where they lost it was in all the capitalistic stuff that's happened,
Yep. And what happens when we have when I think of somebody who's starting to walk down a rocky road, where I start getting nervous, it's the arrogance.
Yeah, humility is
always
so important.
Is the first step.
Yeah, humility is key, and that's where I get frustrated too. I kind of wish doctors weren't allowed to prescribe herbs because they often don't know. They really don't have a good grounding in herbalism. I wish that what they could do, or I wish that what insurance would allow them to do, is to have doctors have a consulting herbalist.
Well, that's what we have in my clinic.
And then the doctor can prescribe whatever herbs the herbalist and doctor agree make sense for that patient, that don't interfere with whatever pharmaceuticals or other therapies the doctor's also prescribing.
The doctors in my clinic, they don't prescribe any herbs, but what they do say is, here is your health plan. You need to go talk to an herbalist to get some recommendations. And that's a totally different thing. And that a doctor won't prescribe, with a few exceptions, a certain diet. There are diets that can be part of prescription, but for the most part, it's like, man, you got to stop eating them hamburgers. That is not doing you any good, friend. Yeah. Or your blood glucose is through the roof.
Right.
No, let's talk. Let's talk about this. So there's prescription for stuff, and then there's just I got some suggestions for you. And there's lots of stuff that is allopathic medicine that is actually herbs and has been for a long, long, long time. Yes. We talked about gentian blue before.
Yeah, yeah.
And we, of course, aloe as in bandages and
and there's stuff like, I know there's a a valerian derivative that's used for treating anxiety and seizure disorders. You know, it's really it's valerian. It's now a synthesized version of valerian, or a part of valerian. It's not the whole plant,
right?
But it's a part of it.
Yeah, and as we're getting better at biochemistry, you'll see more of that showing up all the time.
Well, most of our pharmaceuticals
are from plants.
Are plant derivatives.
Yep.
They're isolated constituents from plants, usually at this point that have been synthesized.
Yep.
But really, it still comes from plants.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when the Pacific U, the stuff for cancer.
Yes.
The Taxol, and people were, oh my gosh, you can use this and it'll treat you. And our harvesting of all of those trees endangered the trees. So in that case, turning it to a synthesized product is actually much, much better.
Right.
For at least us in the Pacific Northwest, we like having those trees around us.
Right. Well, yeah.
So and there's the price to be paid, and there's some luxury.
Yeah, and that's another one where I kind of think, well, it would have been good for the medical folks who were doing that to have had a much stronger grounding in traditional herbalism, because I bet you was really clearly appropriate for a swath of the people they used it for, and there was probably something different that would have been better for a swath of the people, and they wouldn't have to have relied just on you. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, I think that's one of the things that ends up happening is people think, oh my God, oh, turmeric, it's like a godsend, or oh, golden seal, it's a godsend, it's good for everything. Everybody should use it.
Right.
You know, and the next thing you know, the plant's
panacea.
Yeah, and then the next thing you know, the plant is over harvested and at risk or endangered.
Right. And has been used poorly for so long. And then people lose their faith in herbal medicine. Well, I took this for my depression. It didn't work.
Well, yeah.
Which type of depression do you have? And which plant did you use it for? Because there's a variety.
Yeah, no wonder it didn't work.
You know? Yeah. Right tool, right problem. Yeah. This is a bigger conversation that I think we can deal with.
It's an ongoing conversation. This is something we should be talking about for the next few decades.
Yep, we definitely will as it turns. Well, we want to thank Thomas Easley for talking with us again and for inspiring this conversation that we're having. And
if you're interested in continuing education, he certainly does have a lovely number of webinars that you can do.
That I apparently will be putting into the links of the show notes. Yes. And remember, y'all, you go to our website and you'll see the show notes for the individual podcasts. And please look at them, because I've been putting a lot of work into those. So there's just links there and information. And instead of just listening, then you can listen and then do something active, find out more about these different plants. So we appreciate you spending some time with us, and
as always,
put an herb on it.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.